Perfectamundo. So 3, 2, 1. Hi, folks. Hi, folks. Welcome to Big Data, Big Questions, where we try to answer all the questions around data and dig into career options in data, IT, and development. So today is another amazing career deep dive. Today we have Jason Alba on. He's been a Pluralsight author since, I think, 2012, 2013. He has a lot of great courses, and he helps a lot of folks in their journey, whether they're, looking for their first role in IT or development, all the way to looking for a leadership role, maybe changing careers at some point. And so it was a great opportunity to sit down and kind of get his thoughts on, a lot of the questions that we have on the channel. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know I had a blast. I had to cut it off. I mean, we just continued to talk. I'm definitely going to have Jason Alba back on. So enjoy this. And if this is your first time and you love this, or if this is not your first time but you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an amazing episode here. So let's jump right in and talk with Jason Alba. Perfectamundo. So 3, 2, 1. Hi, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Big Data, Big Questions. Continuing our career series. Jason Alba, introduce yourself to the Big Data, Big Questions audience.
All right. Hey, thanks for having me on. So my name is Jason Alba, and I have been in the IT world for over a couple decades now, somewhere around there.
All runs together.
It really does. I mean, at my age, everything runs together. I started out in web development, loved that back in the 1900s. One of my favorite things is database design, and doing smart things with web apps and that are tied to databases. So that's kind of my background as far as a technologist. I one day got into management, and that really put me on a whole different course. I'm not going to say it's a better course or a worse course, but it was kind of a course that I couldn't back away from, because once I got heavier into management, I went further away from technology. So right now I have a website for job seekers. It's called jibberjobber.com. It's like a CRM for job seekers to help organize and track all the networking and stuff. I do a lot of speaking and webinars on careers and job search and personal branding and networking and stuff like that. And I have right now about 3 dozen courses in the Pluralsight library. And those things really take up a lot of my time. So that's pretty much what I'm doing today.
No, that's perfect. And correct me if I'm wrong. So I met you when I joined Pluralsight. I think in 2015. You've been creating courses. Is it 2013?
I think it's 2012.
2012.
If I remember, it was like July of 2012.
So rolling in here to your 9th year, man. That's amazing. So I got so many questions, but let's just start off here. So why did you start making Pluralsight courses and blogging and doing these things?
I'll start with the blogging, because that's easier. Back in 2006, when I started my company, I needed to do marketing, right? And I didn't have any money. All the money I had went into paying for developers and QA, which was great investment at the time. And I thought, well, I can't do the dev stuff, or I shouldn't do the dev stuff, because those guys are way better than I am. But I can market, and I don't have any money for that, but I can blog, I can write. So I started blogging every day, and I was a nut. Like, I was blogging, I said every day, including Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. And I think it was like one Christmas morning, I was writing a blog post, and I was like, yeah, this is stupid. So I'm going to start taking holidays off. And then I started slowing down on weekends. But I was just so excited to get content out and try and play the SEO game and build a community and all that other stuff. So that's how I started blogging. It became addictive. Blogging has been a lot of fun. I've gotten a lot of value out of networking, meeting people, and people who could bring me into their own networks and stuff. So that's been awesome. I eventually wrote a book on LinkedIn. This was the first book. It's recognized anyways as the first book that people could, non-recruiters, right? Normal people could learn about LinkedIn. And then I started speaking. People pay me $5,000 to get on a plane and go speak for an hour. And I thought that was pretty awesome. So anyways, one day, one of my friends, I guess, was already involved with Pluralsight. And this was, early on in the Pluralsight organization, the history. and they're like, oh, you should talk to Jason Alba. He wrote a book on LinkedIn and he speaks all over the world, and whatever they thought I did at the time. So I remember sitting out, I wouldn't even go home because my house was too noisy. So I was sitting outside on the curb under a tree in the summer, talking to the person at Pluralsight who was trying to get me to be an author. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, man. I make $5,000 on stage per time. And I would kind of be shifting a lot of my business. And I didn't know Pluralsight was going to be around. I didn't understand their vision and all that stuff. Long story short, I said yes. And there's a whole story involved in like how those first 6 months and 8 months went, which was not promising. Like I thought amazing things were going to happen and they didn't, but eventually I but I really understood the vision and the future of Pluralsight and the opportunity. And I thought, okay, I want to be involved with this. This is the gamble that I'm going to take on where I invest my time.
No, it was interesting. So I have a couple questions in there around that, but I think for the audience to kind of, I want to pull back on a thread. So you went from, you say, software development, web development, database design. A lot of folks that watch this channel are in transition or maybe in careers, and my hope for this channel too is that folks care and pay attention to their career. Whatever that path may be. And one of the things that came up for me a while back, and it was earlier in my career than I thought. So I think people that are watching are probably going to face this, or will face this at one time, is that decision: do I go deeper as an individual contributor, or do I become a manager? So you made that decision. Can you walk us through kind of your thought process on that, and how do we evaluate that? I mean, I'm at that position. I see that position all the time, continually in my career now. I'll be honest.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It's very individual. So, I mean, you have to understand that ever since I was little, I wanted to be an executive at some huge company. I wanted the corner office with a bathroom and 2 secretaries and access to the corporate jet. Like, that's the kind of vision that I thought I had when I was little. And so when I started, when I became an adult and started working for real and learning about this stuff, it's like, okay, it's going to be a long time to actually get there. But, maybe, I mean, I'm going to be on the path to get there. So that's my foundational thinking. I always wanted to be in management and leadership and have a seat at the table and stuff like that. How it happened for me was way less romantic than that, or ideal. I remember I was working with some developers that I actually was put into this management role, but I still could do development if I wanted to. And I remember we went into a conference room and started whiteboarding some problems, and they started talking about stuff, and I couldn't keep up. I had no idea what they were talking about. And granted, the language that I was used to was different than this company and what we were using, like the methodologies, how, working in a bigger team, like there's so many different things. And I just thought, I can't do this. I can't be on the same level or even close to the same level or work up to the level as these developers. And so it's probably time to kind of hang that hat and go become a manager. Because I could talk about this stuff, and I love product design and product development, and I love working with customers, and I love thinking about implementations, and I mean, everything. I just knew that for me anyways, it was time to hang it up and kind of walk away from technology. Now, I'll say, having done that, there was another meeting. We were in a whiteboard situation, and they're like, I said, this is what we want to do. And they're like, well, that's impossible. You can't technically do it. And I was like, well, why don't you just do it this way? And I stood up and I started drawing some stuff on the whiteboard, and they're like, oh man, never thought about that. Right. And so having the background of a technologist was really critical in being able to lead and manage and work with technologists. I think that's really critical. So, but to your question, like, how do you make that decision? We just did a webinar with Pluralsight on going from an individual contributor to a manager. And I think one of the most important points that I want to leave with people is I've talked to people, right, because of the line of work that I'm in, working with job seekers or people who are transitioning into different fields or companies or whatever. I've talked to people who were developers and they loved it. And they thought that the natural progression was to go into management, and they did, and they hated it, right? Because you're not solving problems the way that you were as a developer. You're now solving human problems. And you might be having very difficult conversations and breaking bad news to people, or, you might give somebody a raise that you think is a good, fair raise. And they're like, well, this is horrible. I'm going to go across the street and make 20,000 more. Right. And so these are all, there's so much soft, weird stuff when you're dealing with humans. And I'm not saying that it's bad, but it's different. Right. And so if you love what you do as a developer, or whatever you do, whatever technology you're in, I just want you to know that management is not necessarily the next logical step up, if you will. Maybe you're looking at more of an architect type role or a senior role or something like that. But man, if you don't feel like you have to go into management because that's what it seems like you should do.
So assume that assume that the person, is evaluated and said, I understand that it's a different skill set, and I want to take the opportunity to kind of grow and develop that skill set. How do they make that transition? What is that first? How do you get that first leadership role? Like, what are the things that they can be doing to work on today, or to stand out, to find that leadership role? Because that maybe that first one is the hardest, right?
Yeah, might be. The last one, which might be like a C-level, VP of IT or CIO or CTO or something like that. That's probably harder because there's less of those. So I think it depends a lot. Like if you're at an organization, it's going to depend a lot on your organizational culture, right? Because I worked at a government institution where everything was super prescribed. And what they said was, the only way you're going to get a promotion is if somebody dies and then that position opens up. Well, we had like 3 people die and the positions never opened up, right? So at that organization, you just couldn't move into management. I actually left from there. I was not in technology, but I left from there and I went over to my first technology role. And so there was something really interesting that I learned. So there was a guy that sat a few cubicles away from me, and he was really fun and fun to chat with and stuff like that. And he was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years ahead of us, the interns that were there. And he said, what's interesting is if you get on full time here, you will always be Jason the intern, because that's how you came here. That's how we know you. And people will talk about you for years, even after you get on full time. He said, the only way to get around that is to go to another organization for a year or two and then come back if you want. And then you won't be Jason the intern anymore. That was a cultural nuance that was at that organization, right? So I think the last company that I worked for, which built HRIS systems, they had an amazing culture. And I think if I wanted to be a manager in that organization, we had weekly one-on-ones. Everybody had weekly one-on-ones with their boss for an hour. Like this was a big deal in this organization. I think that I would go to my boss and say, hey, I want a management role. I want a fast track, or I want a path to leadership. So can you help me get there? What is that path? And that conversation would have gone really well in that organization, right? So on one end of the spectrum, you have the government, big institution, unbending. And then on the other hand, you have these organizations that are really big on like culture and a lot more flexible. So the answer really depends on where you're at in those. But let's switch gears a little bit and say you're in a job search, like you're completely open to going somewhere else. One of the things that I tell people in job search is, too often we make our resumes or CVs or LinkedIn profiles or whatever, we make them backwards facing. We talk about what we used to do, what we did, like what's the path that got us to where we are. And I say, or actually, I think I heard this phrase, your resume is not your obituary. We don't have to have, it is an excellent phrase. We don't have to have our marketing asset, okay, whether it's resume, CV, LinkedIn, whatever. We don't have to have our marketing asset backward facing like an obituary, like, well, Jason did this and Jason did that. And, instead, what I want you to think about is your resume or your marketing asset as a forward facing marketing document, right? And so instead of saying, I did this, I did this, I did this, I want you to say, if you're looking at a management role, say, I can do this. I have this characteristic, and here's people that talk, here's what people say about me, or here's an example of when I use this characteristic. And so you can talk about managing people, and you can talk about listening skills and communication skills and negotiation and all the different things that you think go into that management role, right? And then figure out those characteristics and then put some meat behind them. Like talk about how you actually do those things. Those are the things, that's the way that you position yourself as, yeah, you need these 5 characteristics. Well, I have them, and here's some proof, like here's some evidence. So the only other thing I would say is, if you really want to become a manager or a leader, you need to start getting mentors, and they don't have to be like official like handshake relationships or contractual relationships. I have mentors that didn't even know they were my mentors, but I listened and I learned a lot from these people, right? So but I would definitely try and sit down with people and say, hey, here's where I want to be. You've had the career that I'd like to have. What do you advise me to do? Like, who should I talk to, and how should I approach this? And what should I do as far as like education or certifications or any kind of quantification?
How much does branding, and when I say branding, just so everybody's clarified, because sometimes it's looked at it as a bad term, and I don't think of it that way, especially in IT. Branding can be answering questions on Stack Overflow, or blogging, Pluralsight courses, interviews like this, podcasts, whatever. How much does branding help when you're shooting for those roles?
So you caught me at a good time, because I am right now redoing my personal branding course on LinkedIn.
I didn't know that. I did not plan this, folks. This was not in the show notes. Once again,
it's not in the show notes. I actually came out with the first course about 5 years ago. But before that, when I did a lot of traveling and speaking, branding was almost 1/2 of my presentation. And here's why. When I started my really, really bad job search, this was the job search that I didn't want to have, right? Well, it was bad because it was unplanned, but it was also bad because I had no idea what I was doing, right? Every job search I had up until that point was, I networked into jobs, and it was very easy for me to get a job. And I kind of thought I was hot stuff. And then all of a sudden I find myself out on the curb, unemployed, and I have a very short runway before I actually have to get a job, right? And so I had just moved myself to the area from out of state. Nobody knew me in the state, because I'd go to work and I'd do my thing for a weird industry, and we didn't really have customers in the state. So I had almost no network in town, right? And so it was really hard, but I humbled myself, and I finally went to some job clubs. I felt humiliated because I was broken, right? So I go to these job clubs, which were exceptionally important for my job search. But I'd start talking with people, and I'd find out like they grew up there, they went to school there, they have roommates that are in the next town. A lot of their friends work in their industry, and they had, number 1, a network, and number 2, a brand. And when I say brand, this is how I define brand, because a lot of people have this really weird idea of like what a brand is. And when it comes down to it, your brand is simply how others perceive you. It might not even be how you want them to perceive you, or all the stuff you've been putting on your LinkedIn and all these other places. The bottom line is how others perceive you is what your brand is, right? And so what I learned very quickly in looking at all of my competition, if you will, these other people at the job clubs, was that they all had networks, and they all had a brand. They were perceived in the area a certain way. I had nothing. I was starting at zero. And I'll tell you what, it's no fun. It's no fun when you have to get up in front of somebody and introduce yourself and tell them who you are every single time. Whereas the person next to you is like, oh yeah, we know you. We've followed your work for the last 2 companies you've worked at, or something like that. So my argument is everybody has a brand, because you're perceived somehow. You might be the new guy, you might be the, the tall guy,
The
you might be
intern.
the nice guy, the intern, exactly. So everybody has a brand. My whole idea is, how can we make the brand, how can we make how you're perceived to be how you want to be perceived? That's what personal branding is. So, I mean, I'm super duper biased, but I would say it's really important, and it can help you. It can help you as a freelancer. It can help you with side hustles. It can help you get your next job. It can help you get funding. It can help you build a team, right? If you have the brand of being someone who builds awesome technology teams that are successful with a great culture, people are going to want to work with you, right? That's what branding is.
Somebody in the audience that's watching this that says, "Okay, now I understand. I totally agree with you. Everybody has a brand. I want to do something to impact mine positively. What's the first thing they want to do something in the next 2 weeks, right? What's something actionable that you would advise for them to do? One to two things.
Hmm. Well, I mean, there's probably at least a half a dozen first things, depending on which way you want to attack this. One thing I would say is go beef up your LinkedIn profile. I used to do LinkedIn profile evaluations, spend about an hour on a webinar and talk people through, what they should do. I think once I was on a call where I was like, your profile is great. Like, this is one of the best profiles I've ever seen. You really don't have any work to do. Go work on other stuff like blogging or writing articles on LinkedIn or something like that. So the first thing I would probably say, just because of what LinkedIn has become, right? Whether you're hiring somebody, looking for someone, or you're going to go to lunch or get on a webinar with someone and you just want to research them before you have that meeting, that's what LinkedIn has become. So go out there and look at LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile, and figure out how you can communicate. Once again, not necessarily the backward facing stuff, but looking forward and the value that you're bringing to organizations or roles. The other thing I would probably recommend is, I'm going to say this in very general terms with a word that doesn't seem general, but it is start blogging. Okay. And so whether you create your own blog, and which, I mean, that means you got to like set up a blog and maybe maintain a blog and all that stuff, or you simply start writing articles on LinkedIn or on Dev2 or on Medium, or, somewhere where it's already set up and you can just drop in whenever you feel like it and write an article. But here's the idea. I remember years ago, someone was like, well, what if nobody ever reads my blog except my mom? And I'm like, well, here's the deal. What if nobody ever reads your blog except the person that's looking at your resume, and they go find just 12 posts? They don't even have, nobody's going to go look at every single post you've ever written. But let's say you have 12 posts that talk about this characteristic. Remember the characteristics we were talking about. So leadership, management, technology, security, so whatever the breadth is, those characteristics. And then your blog or your articles can drill down, and you can like blog a lot about leadership or security or whatever. So if I was a hiring manager and I had 5 resumes in front of me, and if you've ever been a hiring manager, those last 5 resumes, they look the same. And the 5 people that come in for interviews, they sound the same. They're all like, they all pretty much say the same thing. And you can't really get a whole lot out of a resume or a 30 or 40-minute interview. But if I can find your blog where you talk about some of those things that I'm looking for, I can be like, man, this is what Thomas thinks about when he doesn't have to think. Like, this is what he's interested and passionate about.
No, that's good. And man, I have a question here, and it's amazing that I wrote this down before I'd asked you that question as we were talking, but I think I know where the answer is going to be, but I definitely would think it's good for the audience and for me to know. I'm very curious. So your first course was on LinkedIn. You were just talking about how that's one of the steps for branding. I was going to say, is it still relevant? I think you've answered that, but what is the current state? Like, do you think, what's your thoughts on LinkedIn today versus when you did your first course in, I think, 2012 on that?
Yeah. So my book, which came out in, I think it was 2008, the brand of the book company is Happy About. That was a company name. And they wanted the book to be called Happy About LinkedIn. And I was like, I'm not happy about LinkedIn. Like, there's a lot that I would change or that I don't endorse or whatever. So I didn't have the title to be happy about. And when I made my first course and when I go talk about it, like I get paid just to talk about LinkedIn, which is kind of funny because it's like, okay, guys, this is one part of your job search. Like there's a whole lot of other things you could and should be doing. Don't spend all your focus and time on LinkedIn. I think it's critical that we kind of have some kind of presence there. And I have a course on optimizing your profile, and I have a different course on like proactively using LinkedIn with groups and messaging people and finding the right people and stuff like that. But you can be successful without a LinkedIn profile, and you can be successful without being active on LinkedIn. I know plenty of people who have no idea what they're doing on LinkedIn. Most of the profiles I see are really weak. Like there's a lot of work to do, but I go back to the idea that, you know, when people are evaluating you before they know you, you know, whether they see your resume or they see a post somewhere, they'll go look at your LinkedIn profile and they're hoping to find information, even though a lot of profiles are really weak. There is still enough there that people are like, oh, I'm going to go check this person out and see, you know, if, you know, what their background has been and kind of what they've worked in and stuff like that. So I think it's relevant. I think there's a lot of opportunity for you individually to enhance and beef up your own profile. But I don't think that people should be spending, you know, 5 hours a week on it generally. I mean, unless you have a real purpose to, it's not going to be a time suck, right? But I do think it's something that's important that you should spend some time on.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I don't know how it's happened for me, but I mean, there's so many social media platforms, but I'm really I'm really bullish on it. It's one of my favorite platforms, and so you know, I do spend a good bit of time there, and I feel like I'm underutilizing it. Please don't look at my profile. I'm afraid of what you'll think, but just for the blogging aspect, so many other pieces, and then YouTube's the other one that I'm kind of bullish on because you can. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say you can't, but for me, I don't feel like I have the time to be successful on all platforms,
Yeah,
and so
for sure.
LinkedIn is one of those, and I'll give you so. I was in a career transition where I was trying to move from a software engineer more into a solutions architect, kind of sales engineer, you know, something more in a different role. I like speaking, and and I've talked about this on this channel before. I used LinkedIn as kind of my go-to. Like I was in an area, and you know, traditionally to find folks in that area, they weren't going to be around here. So so I was like, I'm going to connect with people, and I put myself on a quota. Like, hey, I'm going to try to reach out to so many people, and just ask for advice. You know, I didn't ask for a job. Ask for advice on what can I do to get in this role. This is kind of my background. These are some of the things that I'm working, and I mean, it didn't happen overnight, but putting in that consistency, and this was back in 2013, 2014. So I think it's a great platform and a great opportunity, and you would be surprised at you know how many people you can connect with
Yeah.
there. So I like the platform a lot too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the way you used it though was really brilliant. So I actually have a product. It's a 6-week product for job seekers where I tell you every morning what 3 things to do that day, right? And it's based around what's called informational interviews. And there's a whole bunch of different interpretations of what that means. And I have my own flavor of that. But basically what you were doing was asking for you were starting down the informational interview path, right? So
Yeah.
I've gotten plenty of requests like, hey, do you know of any openings, or can you help me find a job? And I'm like, I don't know where you live. I don't know what industry you're in. I don't know what salary. I mean, no, I can't help you with that. But when somebody comes and they're like, hey, you know, I noticed that you've been in this industry for 10 or 15 years or whatever, or that you've been in this role for 5 years. I have some questions for you because I'd like to do some of this, and I want an insider perspective. That is awesome. And people feel appreciated, and they actually feel like you're going to listen to their opinion, right? And so it's really quite brilliant. Now, the interesting thing about LinkedIn that I found is I don't see very strong technology groups in LinkedIn. I don't see a lot of developers and techies. And, you know, the joke, if you will, is that developers hate recruiters. They hate recruiters calling them and nagging them and bugging them at work and all this stuff. I mean, you hate them until you need them, right? It's kind of like, well, anyways, I'm not going to say what it's kind of like, but you hate them until you need them, right? And so for some people, LinkedIn is an excellent platform to expand their network and grow their business or grow their, just push their brand or something like that. But I haven't found many technologists that find value in investing time there.
Yeah, I would say the weak point, one thing that I found, and I'm still following those specific groups is, like I'm in a Hadoop group or I'm in, an AI group and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. They're not as active as some other places where
Yeah.
even the comment section in Medium or, some of the interaction that I've had in Facebook groups back in the day, with those Hadoop communities and everything. But I think they are. I don't know. It's different for me because I'm more I do a good bit of marketing in my role, but I have found them just to be very very beneficial. And as you grow and meet, you go to a conference and meet somebody, it's like you said, it's the first thing, one of the first things you do. Or I sit in somebody's good session, session, and I'll send them a message. I'm sure you get those
Yep.
too. Or
Yeah.
you're on stage, and by the time you pop off, you've got 3 messages from people that
Yeah.
couldn't
And
wait in line to
invitations and
connect.
stuff.
Yeah, and so, I don't know, man. It's I
It's a
think there's
good
a lot of
platform.
upside still.
Yeah.
I think.
I agree. I agree. I think there's also a lot of opportunity for an individual to go find those upsides.
Yeah,
So
I guess I'm biased. I'm gonna go back to it, but I think about the last 2 or 3 roles I've had. It all came from LinkedIn, and I want to say I didn't even fill out an application, right? Like that's the way that it worked. That they had my profile and everything that I've done, and I try to link videos like this if I go to a conference. And so, yeah, if anybody out there in the audience doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, I agree with Jason. So I was pretty sure I did, but I guess I just mumbled on right here now and figured out that I did even more. So it's yeah. All right, so I'm gonna switch it up a little bit and move. So, you know, what advice would you give to somebody who's, they're in transition, right? And so, they're, hey, I'm coming from a software engineer. I would like to get into more data engineers, or into a data engineer, or maybe they're even in different industries. And this is the thing we've been doing on this channel, is it's not just about big data, but I've talked to a friend of mine. She's really good. She went from being an engineer into marketing and found out that she loves product marketing. So,
yeah.
what are some of the tips that you would give folks who are in transition? Because you have a view where you get to talk to more people about, who are forced in a job transition sometimes. But
Yep.
what about people who aren't forced into that and have time to look around? What advice?
Time is a beautiful thing. I mean, it is so nice. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, as I get older, one of the things I'm really looking for is the right culture and environment to work in. I've worked with some real jerks for a long time, and for years, right? And it's physically stressful. It's emotionally stressful. It's been stressful on my relationships and my family and with my wife. And this is all stuff that has come from places where I've worked, right? So one of the things that I would advise, if you have time, is to really figure out what kind of environment you want to work in. Some people really like the 9 to 5 and that's it. And other people want fast paced, and hopefully they'll go to like some high tech funded startup that maybe they get some equity in, and maybe after a couple of years they might have a buyout or something like that. So you got to figure out where you're at in your life, and your tolerance and kind of what environment you want. But as far as like roles and stuff like that, I would say talk to as many people as you can. I didn't realize, like in the last job that I had, I was a program manager creating a new product line, and the company didn't want to put me on the product team because it was a weird situation. They didn't know where to put us, so they put us in marketing. And I loved it. I sat with this huge marketing group, and I never thought of myself as part of marketing, but man, it was fun to listen to them chat with each other and listen to how they thought and the problems that they were trying to solve, and the solutions, how they came at it. There's some crazy smart people in marketing, And I never really had that perspective before, right? When I was coming out of school, I remember all the marketing majors were like begging for jobs, and the IT people were like, I already got a job. I got 3 offers, right? So I would say go talk to people. You think you want to be an executive, go have lunch with an executive. You think you want to go into marketing, or that you won't want to go into marketing. I mean, I know people who have gone from being, heads down developer plugging at a keyboard to becoming sales engineers, and they love it, right? They
Yeah.
love the opportunity. They love the challenge. They love talking with people. They love helping a company grow. There are so many opportunities for us, for everybody in an organization. There's so many different places where you can add value. Having a technical background is a huge plus, right? But it doesn't mean that you're going to be, especially if you don't want to be, but it doesn't mean you're going to be stuck programming or doing IT or security or whatever for the rest of your career. This could be one phase of your career. The world is big, right? And we're not even, Thomas, we're not even talking about entrepreneurial side hustles, freelancing,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. We're just talking about like regular job stuff. There are so many opportunities, but my number one piece of advice is go talk with people. See if you can shadow them, take them out to lunch, whatever that means in a COVID world. Eat lunch
Yeah.
on Zoom or something, but talk to people and ask them.
Yeah, I think since you said that, I think I saw where I don't know if it's a startup or some kind of social company where they'll actually pair you up right now. And I don't know if it existed before COVID, but I have to think that it is really skyrocketed now. But it will, where you can actually have a Zoom lunch to schedule and everything.
Yeah,
Um,
that's cool.
what what do you do to keep learning? And what are some tips? What do you do to keep learning and growing? Whether in your career field, whether in your entrepreneurship, is it primarily reading? What are some of the things that you do to continue that?
So I'm in a weird position where I'm a course creator, right? Like I don't have a job that I need to learn skills for. I got all my skills down, but what I have to do is learn every bit of my next course and figure out what I'm going to include and exclude and how I'm going to present it and stuff like that. So when I start a new course, I will spend about a month just researching. I'll try and watch videos. I have had a really hard time finding good content. For example, on YouTube, I'll try and watch TED videos or TED Talks and anything I can find to like help me expand my brain around the topic. But I usually walk away from those frustrated. But I'll go everywhere though. I'll look at blogs, which are usually more personal, and here's my experience. I'll look at articles. Sometimes I'll go to the library and just kind of sift through all the books and just kind of pick and choose information I like. But that's in research mode, right? So I guess I'm more eclectic. One of my last courses that I did, which was on emotional intelligence, which I thought was really fluffy and kind of like nobody's going to care about this. Like
Hmm.
this isn't even a real thing. This is like a fake thing, right? It's
it's,
not
it's
even
it's a real thing.
pseudoscience. It's like pseudoscience, right? Well, anyways, I was talking to my kids and they're like, yeah, one of our teachers at school, every week she teaches us for an hour about emotional intelligence. And she's super passionate about it. And it turns out she's a family friend from years ago. So we had her over to our house and we sat with her for like 2.5 hours. And I took pages and pages of notes. And so I go to the expert. I want to go to somebody who is just, they sleep it, they eat it, they drink it, they're so passionate about it. And I want to hear what their perspective is. I'll tell you what, when I walked out of that meeting with her, I couldn't wait to get started because I was running into roadblocks on, like fluffy, that's baseless, like that doesn't make sense. And then I sat down with this lady who teaches an hour a week to kids about emotional intelligence. I was like, I'm sold. This is one of the most important topics that I could talk about ever. Let me get started. So, anyways, I'm pretty eclectic in how and where I get information from. But I'll usually start with Google, try to go to videos, and then I hope to talk to experts.
Man, you just listening to this, you're giving me so many ideas and so many things that I need to take back and kind of put in my career. What shame on me for not having it up and looking at it. But do you have a course on networking?
No, I would like to.
That's a
I got
huge one,
this.
man. I
It
mean, I
is.
pulled this out from you like as I'm taking the notes, like so meet people, and then that story right there of your daughter or your son's teacher
Teacher, yeah.
coming over and taking notes. That's the power of networking, and
Yeah.
I
It
didn't do it
is.
early. I didn't do it good early in my career, and I don't know that I'm amazing. I don't know that I'm great at it now. I think I'm good at it, but oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
Hey, we have our whole life, right, to
yeah,
figure out. It's relationships, it's human
yeah,
relationships. Let me go backwards on my no answer. I have a course called Career Management 2.0, and I actually just revised it, so it's pretty fresh. And so, Career Management 2.0, there were two things that I would talk about on stage. Remember, I said earlier that I'd spend, I think I said almost half of my presentation was on personal branding, right?
yeah.
Well, the other side of career management is networking and relationships. So I probably talked for about 45 minutes about networking and relationships. Just real quick, since we're on the topic, for years and years, because I've given this presentation hundreds of times from stage. It's my favorite presentation. I am passionate about it, right? More than I am about like, hey, do this on your LinkedIn profile. I love doing the career management presentation because I get a lot of people who are like, yep, I need to do this right now, right? So the third part, finally, after years of thinking, how can I enhance this or update it and bring it up to speed? Well, guess what? Personal branding is not going to go out of fashion. Like it will always, before there was personal branding, there was reputation management, just a different word for the same thing that people did in the 50s and 60s, right? And then networking, that's never going to go away. Networking will never not be important in our careers, right? Well, I finally figured out what the third element or a way to update career management 2.0 was. Once again, there's a whole nother topic that we could talk for a long time about, is income streams. How can we develop multiple streams of income? There's actually a book called Multiple Streams of Income by Robert Allen. And I tell people, I say, I don't really recommend the book. I only read about half of it. And I'm like, I got it. I get it. Right. I said, but I recommend the title. So write down multiple streams of income and read it like 10 times a day. Right. I want you to think about, and I'll tell you what, man, I got laid off a couple years ago from that program that I was trying to build. The company decided to go in another direction, so they just shut the whole thing down. And as I'm getting laid off, my thought was, and I got paid really well. Like actually, I think that was my highest paying job I'd ever had. So really good job. I loved the environment. The money was good. And I was thinking as I was getting laid off, and I don't know if you've ever laid anybody off, but it's like emotionally taxing to do it. And it sounds pretty stupid, right? But it is. It's hard to do it. And so the person laying me off was like, I'm really sorry and I feel bad and all that stuff. And I'm thinking this job represented less than 50% of my income because I have other income streams. I didn't need this job for the money. And when I went home that day and I told my wife, because we kind of knew it was coming, but when it's official, it's different, right?
Yeah.
I went home that day and I said, hey, it happened. Like here's my last day and here's all the details. And she's like, oh my gosh, like let's go into like budget mode and like really be very careful about every single penny that is going out. And I said, wait, hold on. Here's where our other income streams are at. And here's the growth projection, like the trend. We're okay. This does not impact our family budget. All this does is make some of our other financial goals slow down.
Yeah.
Man, the power of having multiple income streams is so awesome. It was the best way that I've ever gotten laid off, right? That it didn't even matter. So, but you know what? You can create those income streams with a stronger network and with a personal brand. Those three things in career management 2.0, they all tie together.
Yeah, I think that's so great, and we're way off. I don't want to say way off topic, but I love where this is headed. I know we don't have the time to dig into it, but one thing that I learned, and I'll share with the audience, is multiple income streams, definitely, but also being I've heard it called playing defense, but having that buffer, having that emergency fund, and
Hmm.
understanding about just paying attention to your finances and from that perspective. And hey, if you're in the tech world, I mean, we know, by and far, tech salaries and everything, we have great opportunities, whether it comes from salaries, options, everything, everything from that perspective. And rainy days do happen. And if you're prepared for those, multiple income streams help. But also, also having that emergency fund. So, dude,
Absolutely.
Jason, I should have you on another time, man. We could dig into all these other topics because I think these are things that we don't talk about in tech that,
Hmm.
and people, like you said, people like your example about emotional intelligence and that course, people would look at it like, do I really need, do I really need that? But those are skills that I think can make you a better developer, IT, entrepreneur, if you're not having to worry about, oh my gosh, if this project fails or I don't get this contract, or if if I get laid off, I'm just a lot of stress, and
Yep.
and you work better if you're not under stress, and if you have the time. So
And life's more fun.
yeah,
If you so Dave Ramsey, he's like 1% controversial. Like some people hate on him, but I've always wanted to be wealthy, right? Remember I said I always wanted that corner office and all that stuff.
yeah,
I've always wanted
with
to
a
be
bathroom,
wealthy
or
with a
an office with a
bathroom, right?
bathroom.
Yeah. So I want to try it out. Like maybe it'll ruin me and maybe it'll be the fall of me, but I'd like to try it out for a few years, right? Well, there's a really interesting on YouTube right now. There's a lot of commercials for like getting rich quick, really. I mean, that's what
Mm.
they are. You'll see, they don't say that, but that's really like there's these 20-year-old guys that are like with a Ferrari or Lamborghini behind them, and they're like, hey, do what I did, buy my program, and then you can get wealthy too, right? Well, Dave Ramsey's program is not about financial wealth. Do you know what it is? I listen to him more than I should probably. His university, does any of this ring a bell?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Financial Peace
Yeah,
University. And I was thinking about that one morning. I was laying in bed and I was like, okay, I want to be rich, but wait a minute. I also want peace. I want financial peace. And that can come with wealth, but it also comes from what you're saying. Pay attention to your
mm,
finances and figure out what your expenses are and build up your emergency funds and know that if you're going to let go, do you have a 3-day runway or a 3-month runway? I remember I was at lunch with this guy in the San Francisco area. I had just done a presentation to a job club and he invited me over to lunch, and he had a really nice house and a really nice car and he was really calm. And he said, Jason, everybody else in that room that had the Lexuses and the Beamers and all that in the parking lot, they are freaked out because they didn't prepare for this. He said, my wife and I think he had a couple of years that he could go without having a job because he had prepared. He had financial peace.
yeah.
That was really powerful.
No, I definitely. I didn't start reading some. I've read some of Dave Ramsey's books. Rich Dad Poor Dad. A lot of those books, and I don't know. I think I've read quite. Like, there's automatic movie. There's so many different ones, but the biggest thing and if I were to sum up this conversation today, it is pay attention, right? Pay
Hmm.
attention to your LinkedIn. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? You have to, but I think it makes sense to have something. And if you're not going to have something on there, then have a plan for that. And
Yeah.
all that happens by paying attention. So, Jason, I'm going to invite you on for another time, man. We've got to
Cool. I
we've got
passed.
to dig in some of these other topics, but um, I'm going to put here, folks, if you're still tuned in, which I hope you are, in the description here, Jason's courses that he talked about, for sure. Career Management 2.0 is in there. Um, uh, Links to his blog and to his Twitter. But how do you want people to interact and reach out to you if they want to find you?
I mean, I'm pretty easy on Twitter. I got my third monitor, and I'm always looking at what's going on Twitter. There, I'm Jason Alba at Jason Alba. Jason at jibberjobber.com. And those is my email address. Just go to jibberjobber.com and reach out, and it'll get to me. So I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
No, thanks again for joining in. And if you're still watching today, I hope you are and you enjoyed this. Make sure you click that subscribe button and tell us in the comment section how you like this, what your thoughts are. Interact with us. So thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Thomas.